There are only 4 days to go until the new coalition is set to be sworn in, ending Prime Minister Binyamin Netanyahu's 12-year term. The so-called change government is comprised of numerous parties spanning from Yamina on the right to Meretz and Arab party Ram on the left. And as such, reports indicate that there are a number of looming issues that are holding up the signing of the coalition agreements. So this begs the question, what are these issues? And will the new coalition be able to overcome their vast differences in ideology? And here to answer these questions and more are Marc Schulman, columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, and Michael Kleiner, former Likud member of Knesset and head of the Likud Supreme Court. Welcome. So, only 4 days until the new coalition is set to be sworn in. What are some of the major disagreements we're still seeing that have stalled the signing of the coalition agreements?
I don't think there are any major issues.
Go ahead.
I don't think there are any major issues. There are minor issues. Everyone's giving a last fetch. Everyone knows that now's the time to come back and say, look what I achieved, what I achieved. Of course, the reality is none of these things really matter because the government doesn't follow. It's a coalition agreements in any case. The last government that ever did that, I don't know, maybe sometime in Ben-Gurion's time, I'm not sure when. So the reality is these are just PR statements by all of these different groups to what they hope to achieve. And sometime tonight, long before the deadline, they'll come to some sort of agreement. I don't see any of these things that are significant enough or sufficient to stop the agreement and the new government from going forward.
Michael, would you agree?
I believe there are, sorry? I believe there are major issues. Mm-hmm. There are major issues separating the parties. Actually, I don't remember in the Israeli history or even in the history of Western democracies, a coalition with such big ideological gaps between parts of a coalition. They try, maybe there are no gaps because they decided there's no way to bridge those gaps as long as they have this magic glue unifying this coalition called Benjamin Netanyahu. But this glue has one problem. The moment this government will be approved, there will be no more glue, and then nothing will keep them together. So actually, this coalition is doomed from the first day because of these big gaps and not minor gaps, which, like my dear colleague says.
I totally disagree. I don't think it's doomed. I think they're going to last at least 2 years, maybe even the full period of time. The reality is there's one major ideological problem between them, and that's the question of what to do about the Palestinians. If President Trump had been the president right now, there would be a push to do certain things. With Biden in the White House, nothing was going to happen in terms of the Palestinian issue, especially with Biden not really wanting to get involved in the peace process, doing only the minimum he can. So the peace process is not going to be something that's going to be on the agenda the next few years, for good or for bad. We can argue about that one way or the other. It's not going to be on the agenda. There are so many things that need to be taken care of in terms of this country that have nothing to do with the ideological gaps that exist between left and right, because I don't think left and right is the right constellation anymore. I think there are so many things in terms of good governance, in terms of planning. This country hasn't had a long-term plan now for many years. There's so many things that have to get done with new cabinet ministers. You know, the old guard, it's time for it to go. Been in power for way too much time in any democracy. It's time for a change in government. That's what's going to happen now. You'll see these people getting to work, dealing with their own ministries. I think they'll do good jobs, bad jobs. It'll be across the spectrum. But the reality is they're going to be concentrating what they can accomplish. They know what divides them. None of them wants to go to new elections, and they'll stay away from the third rail. Again, external forces may take place. We never know what can happen.
Well, Mark, you said that there weren't any major issues, but what about, for example, the issue of the settlements, right? It's been reportedly what's holding up the coalition signing. So do you foresee them overcoming this?
Yes, it's just Elkin in the last minute trying to score some points with his base. That's all that's taking place right now. There's no major issue.
But this is all about...
And Michael, I see that you completely disagree. So, Michael, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on this?
But all parties will have to score points for their supporters. Bennett is in an urgent need to prove to the right-wing base of his party that he didn't betray them, that he's fighting for them not lesser than Netanyahu. Merav Michaeli from the Labour Party with Mr. Horowitz from Meretz, which are after so many years in opposition, will be under constant pressure from their supporters to show what they achieve now when they sit in in the government, and the papers have to send a new edition every day, and the columnists and the writers, how long will they wait until they will ask, what did you do, Bennett? What did you do, Michaeli? What did you do, Horowitz? And this is the seeds because of the big distance between the parties. No real compromise is possible, so it can fall on law and order, it can fall on justice, on Supreme Court reform, it can fall on Israeli-Arab relations. By the way, Ram is a right-wing party. It is not a left-wing party. It is a religious, very conservative party. This is because if it is Arab, that doesn't mean it's left. It's right-wing. And also with the gay rights are very right-wing, so nobody can define them as left. That's why they prefer Likud, by the way. That's why they prefer to go with the Likud.
I think Michael is dreaming. Likud is dreaming that it's going to be short-lived. They don't know what it's like to be outside of government. It's time for that. But the reality is, I don't expect the left-wing.
We should live and see.
I don't think the Meretz supporters, the Labor supporters, expect them to do very much on the Palestinian front. They'll be very happy to see Meretz take care of the health ministry, and no question, they'll be happy to see Tamar Zeinberg
so,
deal
Mark,
with
you think that this new coalition is going to focus mainly on domestic issues and leave the Palestinian-Israeli issue to the side?
The Palestinian issue nothing has taken place in the Palestinian issue for probably a dozen years. I mean, the attempt of Obama to do something failed spectacularly. So that was the last time any attempt was made. And I don't think anything is going to take place in the next 4 years relating to that. You know, there'll be a problem if a Palestinian Sadat suddenly arrives on the scene, then we have a real problem. But I don't expect that's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. So the reality is, I don't expect that to happen. And I don't think in settlements, I think settlements will stay status quo. I think what exists will exist. The big settlements will continue to grow the way they are. No new settlements will be allowed, but Netanyahu wasn't allowing new settlements either. So I don't expect any of these things to change. The Biden administration certainly wouldn't stand for any settlement expansion. So no one on the right is expecting to do that. And no one on the left is expecting to dismantle any settlements at this point. Everyone understands that. Everyone understands their limitations. They would like to see Meretz do a wonderful job reforming the health ministry. They'd love to see the environment ministry change. They'd like to see Merav Michaeli put together a 10-year plan.
I just want to throw in one more question for Michael.
Problems.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to throw in one more question for Michael. I mean, what can we expect? You mentioned Netanyahu and the Likud. What can we expect from Netanyahu now heading to be leader of the opposition? What kind of opposition leader do you expect him to be?
No, Netanyahu was elected for the whole term. According to the new law in the Knesset, you know, there can be a government change if 61 members of Knesset put a list with a new Prime Minister. So I guess Netanyahu with 53 members of a cohesive right-wing bloc will try to change the government. I believe he will try to follow suit Menachem Begin. He will say it's very good to serve the country in opposition, and he will constantly try to find ways how to materialize the right-wing majority in the Knesset, which, you know, it's between 65 and 72 members of the Knesset define themselves right. And according to the developments in the coalition, he will wait for an opportunity.
All right. Well, Marc Schulman, Michael Kleiner, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.